Imagine, if you will, the world of Symphonia of Sword and Sorcery, a realm you might have explored countless times through a screen. But what if you awoke one day within its very fabric, not as the destined hero, but as Lest Albion, a villainous noble whose story, by the middle acts, is slated to end in death? For years, this new existence unfolded in relative normalcy, until a fateful ritual marked his 14th year. The divine oracle ceremony, where the goddess herself bestows a skill upon each youth. It was during this sacred rite that Lest received the ability known as Tame. In this world, the skill was widely dismissed as utterly trivial, useful only for mundane tasks like guiding horses or corralling pigeons. The news struck Lest's father, the Marquis, like a thunderbolt, igniting a furious disappointment. For generations, the Albion lineage had been renowned for producing peerless swordsmen, a martial tradition of elite warriors. He had envisioned his son would inherit a formidable combat skill, perhaps even the coveted Sword Saint, aligning with their storied martial arts heritage. To receive a non-combat skill, one so seemingly useless, was an insult. The Marquis swiftly deemed Lest unworthy of the Albion name, openly casting him aside. Even Lest's elder brothers, locked in their own rivalry for the coveted heir's position, found ample amusement in his perceived incompetence, delighting in the unexpected ease this would bring to their competition. Witnessing the family's harsh reception, a kind priest attempted to uplift Lest's spirit, urging him not to let their disdain weigh too heavily. The priest harbored a quiet certainty that a greater purpose lay behind the seemingly meager skill Lest had been granted. It was in that very moment, amidst his family's scorn and the priest's gentle reassurance, that a flood of memories crashed into Lest's mind recollections of his past life, of playing Symphonia of Sword and Sorcery. The most startling realization was not merely that he had been reincarnated, but that he had landed squarely in the role of the game's designated antagonist. If the events of the game were to unfold as he remembered, Lest knew his fate was sealed, to be cut down by an executive of the Demon King's army somewhere near the story's midpoint. As a devoted player who had meticulously completed every narrative path, he understood with chilling clarity that no matter which route was taken, his character was always destined for death. After the ceremony, Lest began dissecting every known detail of the game's mechanics and lore, starting with the skill Tame. Ordinarily, Tame was indeed considered a worthless talent, at best suited for controlling common livestock. Yet the truth, a secret within the game's deepest lore, was that Tame could command far more formidable creatures monsters themselves. In the original storyline, the Lest of the game never uncovered this latent power until much later. By then, years of relentless persecution had warped his heart, driving him to misuse Tame to inflict harm upon others. His overwhelming, albeit twisted, power eventually drew the ire of the Demon King's army, who targeted him, stripped him of his abilities, and ultimately ended his life. Knowing this grim future, Lest understood that merely trying to avoid the death flag was insufficient. As long as he possessed this power, the Demon King's forces would inevitably hunt him down. A singular question began to echo in his mind. How could he possibly defy and crush this predetermined demise? Armed with his extensive knowledge of the game's world, Lest resolved to leverage it, not merely for survival, but to ascend to immense strength and seize control of the country. With a precious year stretching before the game's main narrative was set to begin, he meticulously planned a multitude of preparations to secure his ugly fate. However, before he could embark on such ambitious endeavors, a more immediate and, frankly, more toxic challenge awaited him: surviving the daily gauntlet of his own family. One evening, during dinner, Lest's twin brothers, Edward and Sidward, embarked on their usual display of ostentatious prowess, vying aggressively for the attention and favor of their father, Marquis Gad Albion. Their mother, witnessing her two sons' zealous competition, glowed with evident pride. Her gaze, however, hardened as it fell upon Lest, whom she openly branded a disappointment, a consequence of his trash skill. His brothers, not to be outdone, quickly joined in the verbal assault, suggesting that if only he had been born into a family of livestock handlers, his skill might have found its perfect, albeit lowly, purpose. Lest, who had simply been trying to eat in peace, attempted to voice a defense, but his father swiftly silenced him, declaring he had no interest in anything Lest had to say. With his family's bullying reaching a new peak, Lest excused himself and sought solace in a solitary walk. A week had now passed since the resurgence of his past memories, and he had begun to piece together crucial elements of this new reality. Unfortunately, unlike the game, he couldn't simply pull up a status screen to check his attributes. Yet, as he acclimated to this world, he discerned that it possessed analogous mechanics. Individuals could boost their abilities by defeating monsters, much like players in the game gained experience. Understanding this, Les knew that to level up, he needed to train rigorously and eliminate as many monsters as he could. A fundamental rule from the game dictated that he could only tame creatures he had personally vanquished. Thus, to command more powerful monsters, he first needed to enhance his own stats sufficiently to overcome them in combat. One potent method for rapid progression was a daily in-game event known as Midnight Training, or the Midnight Grind. In the game, one could choose from 5 distinct training types each day, each designed to elevate a specific stat. In this world, however, Lest wasn't confined to midnight sessions or a single daily choice. If he performed every type of training daily, he was convinced he could achieve an astonishing pace of growth. Beyond merely increasing his physical strength, he also intended to refine his latent magical abilities. Thanks to the memories of the original Lest, who had inhabited this world until now, he had already smoothly navigated his first magic refinement session. In fact, his current physical conditioning was already above average, a testament to how the original Lest must have pushed himself relentlessly. Despite the game portraying Lest as a lazy slacker, it seemed the profound despair following the tame, skills revelation had spurred him to strive for more, to desperately seek strength. Having completed his usual regimen, Lest decided to head back to the mansion for some much-needed rest. On his return, however, he encountered his 2 bullying brothers, Edward and Sidward, who were themselves on their way to sword practice. As was their custom, they immediately began to taunt him, reinforcing his perceived uselessness. Edward, possessing the skill of a great sword wielder, and Sidward, with his swordsman skill, clearly had reason to view their younger brother with contempt. In the midst of their derisive exchange, a girl suddenly appeared, causing a stir among the maids, Lest, and even the twins. Astonishingly, she carried a gigantic earth dragon effortlessly onto their training grounds, casually remarking that she had personally taken care of it on her journey there. This was Elna Labrazel, the personal sword instructor for Lest's brothers. Though only 18 years of age, she already commanded the title of an S-rank adventurer and was hailed as a genius swordsman. Yet, Lest had no memory of this individual from the game. Her existence was a detail he gleaned solely from the original Lest's accumulated experiences. While S-rank adventurers were not unheard of in the game's lore, witnessing such power firsthand was truly overwhelming. Observing Elna's formidable presence, Lest couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy and frustration that he, too, could not train under someone of her caliber. 2 hours later, within the grand training hall of the Albion family, Elna was rigorously putting the twins through their paces, making their session excruciatingly difficult. Lest, meanwhile, concealed himself nearby, eager to observe more of Elna's extraordinary skills. Just as he suspected, Elna was indeed a warrior of immense power. Yet, seeing her effortlessly battle 2 skilled swordsmen, treating them almost like small children, left Lest utterly amazed. Exhaustion eventually claimed the twins, forcing them to concede defeat. Witnessing this, Lest realized that while he could certainly raise his stats through his own training, true combat proficiency, the nuanced art of fighting, was something he couldn't acquire solely through self-practice. Since Elna only visited the Albion estate once a month for sword training, Lest couldn't afford to squander this rare opportunity. He desperately wanted to ask her to train him as well. However, before he could even approach her, Elna had already sensed his presence. Before Lest fully registered it, she was behind him, moving with the silent grace of a ninja. Lest introduced himself, and Elna immediately recognized his name. Having just witnessed her awe-inspiring training of the twins, Lest, though a touch shy, mustered all his courage. He declared his ambition to become strong and pleaded with Elna to teach him the way of the sword. He quickly added that tame was not a combat-oriented skill, suggesting this was why he hadn't been selected for her instruction. Elna, for her part, was certain that without a proper sword type skill, Lest would never endure her rigorous regimen. Yet, seeing the unyielding eagerness burning in his eyes, Elna found herself unable to refuse his earnest plea. Swifter than lightning, Elna handed Lest a wooden sword, challenging him to demonstrate his worthiness. She wanted him to prove, with his own hands, that he was deserving of her tutelage. Elna's movements were blindingly fast, each strike imbued with immense force, a clear display of her superior skill. Even though she was visibly holding back, Lest knew that a single lapse in his guard would instantly plunge him into unconsciousness. However, no matter how desperately Lest tried, Elna's power simply exceeded his ability to withstand. More than 10 minutes had passed since their spar began, and Lest's legs were already trembling, threatening to give out. Seeing his profound exhaustion, Elna decided to halt the fight for now. Lest immediately seized the moment, asking for her critique. Elna plainly stated that he was far from proficient, his physical abilities barely met a minimum standard, and his swordsmanship was, effectively, that of a complete beginner. However, she was intrigued. Why this fervent desire for such great power? Was it to master the sword, to surpass his brothers, or was there some deeper, more compelling reason? With unwavering dedication, Lest confidently declared his true motivation. He was doing this to triumph against fate itself. This answer astonished Elna. She had never encountered such profound resolve in any of her previous students. Moved, she decided to grant Lest 30 minutes of her time for training. Once she was finished with the twins, Lest would receive his own instruction. She issued a stern reminder. If she caught him slacking even for a moment, she would stop immediately, a promise Lest instantly swore he would never break. Since Elna would not return for another month or so, Lest understood he would have to train on his own, striving to become formidable before their next encounter. 2 months swiftly passed. Today marked Lest's 3rd training session with Elna. Initially, Elna hadn't perceived much improvement, finding his movements rather predictable. To her surprise, however, he suddenly unleashed a series of precise maneuvers, what he called techniques, that she had never witnessed from her other students. In the game, techniques were considered as crucial as skills, perhaps even more so. They were finishers, allowing one to transcend their physical limits. Over the past 2 months, Lest had managed to master one such technique. A single strike that dramatically boosted his sword speed and power, known as Blade Surge Full Drive, the flash step. For the first time in her career as an instructor, Elna encountered a student who actually came close to landing a hit on her. But her superior strength allowed her to block Lest's attack. Lest, however, was filled with frustration, believing his hard work over the past months had still fallen short. Elna, on the other hand, was utterly speechless at Lest's astonishing growth. The fact that he had only been learning swordsmanship for 2 months, yet was already on par with his brothers who had begun 6 months prior, was truly remarkable. While it was clear Lest had poured blood, sweat, and tears into his training, even that didn't fully explain such an accelerated pace. Moreover, the flash step technique he had just employed was designed for users with actual sword skills. For someone without a proper combat class to execute it, even with natural talent, it should have taken at least a full year to learn. Yet Lest had achieved it in just 2 months, leading Elna to wonder if she was, in fact, nurturing a genuine prodigy, an extraordinary talent beyond all imagination. Meanwhile, Lest, despite feeling a little down for failing to land a single blow on Elna, felt immensely grateful for the improvements he had gained thanks to her. Up to this point, his path seemed relatively smooth. He believed that as long as he meticulously avoided encounters with the protagonist or any other characters destined to become his enemies, he could surely overcome his fate. But then, one night, their father, the Marquis, delivered unsettling news. Charlotte, the second princess, was coming to their estate. Lest racked his brain, trying to recall this character. Then, with a jolt, he remembered. She was the main heroine of the game, the second princess of the final kingdom, and Celeste, a living, breathing death flag. If he had to describe her in the game with a single phrase, it would be the perfect princess through and through. Like any young royal, she possessed an insatiable curiosity about the world and was quick to befriend anyone, her pure heart extending consideration to all, regardless of social standing. Blessed with extraordinary talent, she was a justice-driven character, tirelessly training to protect her people. Yet, it was precisely this unwavering moral compass that made her unforgiving of Lest's actions that harmed others. In the middle of the original story, Charlotte stood alongside the protagonist, confronting the rampaging Lest. The climax of that battle resulted in Lest's demise at the hands of a demon lord executive. But according to the game's lore, there should have been absolutely no connection between Lest and Charlotte at this point in the timeline. So, Lest pondered, why had the plot suddenly diverged? As it turned out, Elna also served as the royal family's sword instructor, and she had, in passing, mentioned to Her Highness a talented swordsman of the same age within the Albion family. Intrigued, Charlotte, deeply impressed by Elna's description, decided to meet this individual personally. Believing it could only be one of the twins, the Marquis and his wife were absolutely delighted, filled with pride for their children. Little did they know, the princess's interest was actually fixed on Lest. Realizing he might have inadvertently altered the game's scenario, Lest immediately began to strategize a way to mitigate the unexpected plot twist. 2 weeks later, the day of the official visit finally arrived. Lest, alongside his brothers, awaited the princess's arrival. However, the twins immediately instructed Lest to keep his distance, confidently assuming the princess's interest lay solely with them. Lest, without hesitation, seized the opportunity to make his exit. While his brothers were preoccupied with attending to Charlotte, Lest planned to utilize his newfound free time to hunt monsters. The Arst Forest, a vast monster habitat, stretched across the Albion family's territory. Entry was strictly forbidden until one enrolled in the Royal Academy. Since Lest wished to avoid drawing too much attention for the time being, he decided to postpone his hunting plans. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, the princess had finally arrived, and the twins, along with the Marquis, were now engaged in a formal tea party with her. Beyond her radiant beauty, the twins were also amazed by Charlotte's skill, known as Holy Sword Princess, a top-tier ability that provided substantial boosts to both holy magic and swordsmanship, far surpassing their elder brother's sword skills at the academy. The princess then inquired if she could observe them spar, to which the twins eagerly agreed. To their surprise, however, Charlotte seemed less than amused by their display, finding their skills rather unremarkable. Determined to prevent the princess from losing interest, the twins quickly hatched a desperate plan. Without considering the perilous consequences, they boldly offered to show the princess real combat by fighting monsters within the Arst Forest. Upon hearing this, Charlotte was genuinely shocked. The boys' apparent strength hardly suggested they were prepared to face such dangers. But fueled by overconfidence, the twins quickly assured the princess they could handle it. Charlotte contemplated whether to allow them to proceed, but given the twins' insistent assurances, she had no choice but to witness their claimed prowess. Moments later, the twins, accompanied by Princess Charlotte and her personal assistant, Estella, ventured into the forest. The apprehension in Charlotte's eyes was palpable, a faint sheen of sweat forming on her brow. The forest itself was eerily dark, even in the middle of the day. Despite the palpable danger, the boys continued to reassure the princess with forced smiles, claiming everything was under control. While they walked, the princess suddenly remembered that the brothers had another sibling, someone in her own age group. She immediately asked about Lest's whereabouts. Hearing this, the twins exchanged an awkward glance before offering Charlotte a strained smile. They then concocted a lie, claiming Lest had gone out on his own, convinced that Charlotte would never wish to meet him, especially given his tame skill. In the middle of their deceptive conversation, a gray wolf, classified as an E-rank monster, abruptly emerged, launching a surprise attack on the group. Thankfully, the twins reacted quickly, dispatching the threat with ease. However, despite their initial success, it became apparent to the princess that the twins' abilities were not as impressive as she had been led to believe. Meanwhile, Estella, the princess's assistant, seemed to sense something ominous, immediately suggesting that they should leave the forest. Confused, Charlotte inquired why. Estella revealed a growing sensation of danger approaching, convinced it would be safer for the princess to depart. The twins, still desperate to prove themselves, insisted on staying longer, hoping for a more formidable enemy to appear. Their wish was granted. A C-rank Gale wolf, far more perilous than the previous one, suddenly materialized. The beast charged with incredible speed, and Estella quickly intervened, blocking its initial attack. She then urged the twins to take the princess and flee immediately, which they did. However, while they were on the run, another wolf appeared, effectively cornering them and cutting off their escape. With no other recourse, the princess was forced to employ her magic as the twins struggled to land a single blow on the relentless enemy. Despite her efforts, the Gale wolf's overwhelming strength began to wear her down, placing her in a truly perilous situation. Just as the creature prepared to deliver a fatal strike, help arrived. Lest intervened, completely blocking the monster's attack and saving the princess from certain death. A few minutes earlier, Lest had observed Princess Charlotte and her maid, Estella, entering the Arst forest with his brothers. Without hesitation, Lest rushed to follow them, acutely aware of the forbidden forest's inherent dangers. Realizing his brothers were likely acting to impress the princess, Lest sprinted, determined to arrive in time. As the group made their way through the woods, Lest remained discreet, shadowing them from behind trees, concealed in the shifting shadows. Most monsters in the shallow parts of the forest were low-ranked, manageable for the twins. But if, by chance, they encountered something truly powerful and Charlotte were to be injured, or worse, killed, the entire Albion family would undoubtedly face execution. To be absolutely safe, Lest had decided to follow them at all costs, and it seemed his gut feeling had been spot on. In the present moment, Lest stepped forward, placing himself between the monster and Princess Charlotte just as the beast was about to end her life. It had been an incredibly close call. Lest himself had narrowly avoided a fatal blow. He felt profound relief at arriving just in time, preventing what could have been a grave injury to the princess. With Lest's unfamiliar face suddenly appearing, Charlotte immediately asked who he was. In that instant, Lest remembered that he was indeed meant to introduce himself to Charlotte, even though he had desperately tried to avoid meeting her prematurely. But his brainless brothers had proven unreliable, forcing him into this unexpected situation. Despite the circumstances, Lest still wished to conceal his true identity. Instead of revealing his name, he simply stated he was an ordinary passerby. Charlotte, however, wasn't easily convinced. She rightly pointed out that no ordinary person would choose to stroll through such a dangerous place. With the princess clearly brimming with questions, Lest quickly suggested they defer their conversation, as he still needed to deal with the beast. Charlotte, understanding the urgency, allowed Lest to focus on the task at hand. The Gale wolf Lest faced was a C-rank monster, capable of freely manipulating wind magic, making it a particularly troublesome opponent. Even with his current strength, Lest knew that a head-on confrontation offered him, at best, a 50% chance of victory, or more realistically, closer to 40%. Yet, he tried to remain optimistic, believing his knowledge from the game would somehow tip the scales in his favor. As the monster lunged, Lest expertly dodged, immediately positioning himself to defend the princess at all costs. However, he struggled immensely. The monster's varied attacks left no apparent openings, making counterattacks difficult whether up close or at a distance. This was expected. Gale wolves were notorious for their perfectly balanced offense and defense, making them exceptionally dangerous. However, while this might hold true for an ordinary citizen in the game, Lest was different. As an avid player, he had, in essence, mastered this monster's attack patterns. Because of this intimate knowledge, he finally managed to land a hit, a feat that utterly astonished Charlotte, observing from the sidelines. The princess now wondered intensely about the identity of this mysterious man. Even though this particular monster's physical prowess and sword skills weren't drastically superior to her own, Lest continued to land blow after blow on the Gale Wolf, striking it in ways Charlotte herself couldn't touch. Amidst this unfolding battle, Charlotte suddenly recalled her intense training sessions with Elna. Ever since she had received the title of Holy Sword Princess, she had redoubled her efforts. From the very beginning, she was acutely aware that in terms of pure sword skills and magic, there were individuals whose abilities far surpassed her own. Despite her prestigious title, Charlotte refused to grow complacent, determined not to lose to those more skilled. Seeing Charlotte's fierce motivation had pleased Elna. But as a mentor, she had also cautioned the princess that not all rivals were necessarily high skill holders. It was at this point that Elna had specifically mentioned lest. Elna had attempted to both warn and inform the princess that individuals existed, like Lest, who weren't blessed with incredible innate skills. Yet, through extraordinary talent and relentless hard work, they managed to forge a power that rivaled even Charlotte's formidable abilities. During this conversation, Elna had finally revealed to Charlotte the existence of an intriguing boy from the Albion family, of the same age as the princess. Seeing the genuine happiness with which Elna spoke of this boy, Charlotte had been speechless for a moment. Although she hadn't initially intended to visit the Albion household, when Elna suggested that meeting this individual might further motivate her training, Charlotte found herself captivated. Returning to the present, as she witnessed Lest battling such a powerful monster, Charlotte immediately recognized him as the boy Elna had spoken of. In that very moment, Charlotte was certain. This man was none other than Lest, the despised, useless skill holder everyone gossiped about. Despite being blessed only with the skill Tame, he was a genius, possessing a power that defied all conventional standards. Even if it seemed unbelievable, Charlotte was now convinced that this was the individual Elna had spoken of all along. While Charlotte was utterly mesmerized by Lest's fighting prowess, Lest himself remained intently focused on defeating the monster, especially now that its magical reserves were depleting. He saw this as his golden opportunity to end the fight decisively. So, as the monster unexpectedly changed course, attempting to attack Charlotte instead, Lest moved. With a swift, powerful strike of his sword, he smashed the monster's head, killing it instantly with his one-flash technique. Although this was undeniably a difficult battle for most, Lest made it appear so effortless that even Charlotte, one of the kingdom's strongest skill holders, was rendered speechless by his actions. However, instead of celebrating, Lest felt it was too early for jubilation. For tamers like him, this was where the true challenge began. Now that the Gale Wolf was finally down, Charlotte approached Lest and expressed her heartfelt gratitude for saving her. Hearing the princess speak his name shocked Lest. He hadn't expected her to know it. When she was asked how she knew, Charlotte didn't answer directly. Instead, she mentioned that she possessed the same wooden sword as him, a gift Elna had given each of them individually. To formalize the situation, Charlotte then introduced herself as the princess of the Final Kingdom and informed Lest that she, too, trained under the same swordmaster. For a princess, Charlotte showed no hesitation, bowing deeply before Lest, expressing her profound gratitude for his unwavering protection. She also revealed that his bravery and swordsmanship had deeply moved her. Although Lest attempted to make light of the situation, as if his actions were nothing extraordinary, the princess continued to thank him profusely. Charlotte's wide smile somehow flustered Lest. Before she could notice his rising blush, Lest excused himself, stating he needed to check on the defeated Gale Wolf. While doing so, he also asked the princess if she could look after his brothers for a moment, which Charlotte readily agreed to. With the princess occupied, Lest examined the wolf up close. It was easily 20 times his size. Since things had gone well so far, all that remained was to see if this monster was willing to serve him. As he checked his internal panel, he was surprised to read that the Gale Wolf had indeed taken an interest in him, acknowledging his strength and expressing its willingness to serve. When prompted to confirm if he would tame this creature, Lest didn't hesitate, pressing yes without a second thought. Excited by the fact that this was the very first monster he had ever tamed, Lest gently stroked its fur. Moments later, the system confirmed the taming process was successful, and a portion of the tamed target's power was now granted to him. Thus, Lest had technically acquired a wind magic skill. Furthermore, he had also unlocked Interdimensional Sanctuary as a reward for his inaugural successful tame. As Lest felt the magic power surge through him, he became more exhilarated than ever before. In that moment, Lest finally comprehended why the Lest of the game truly believed he could become the strongest. It turned out, Lest's tame skill didn't merely allow him to control monsters, it also enabled him to absorb the very power of the creatures he commanded. This meant Lest could gain the enhanced physical abilities of the monsters he defeated. If a monster possessed a unique skill, he could also wield it himself. In this specific instance, he had gained the wind magic used by the Gale Wolf. In the game, Lest had succumbed to this immense power, leading to a tragic end where he lost everything. But the Lest of now was different. To overcome his inherent weaknesses, he had undergone intense training, sought Elna's invaluable advice, and refined his swordsmanship. He had no intention of letting all this effort go to waste. This was why he now aimed to tame more monsters, for the more he tamed, the stronger he would inevitably become. Indeed, if Lest continued this path, he would, in due time, become the strongest in the world. Now that the Gale Wolf was officially his monster, Lest decided to give it a name. To keep things simple, he chose Gale as a formal nickname for his new companion. Furthermore, since having such a creature as a pet was far from normal, Lest resolved to keep Gale's existence a secret. To test his new skill, Lest used Interdimensional Sanctuary to temporarily conceal Gale. Moments later, Estella entered the scene, rushing towards the princess, her face etched with worry for Charlotte's well-being. The princess, who had been attending to the twins, smiled reassuringly and informed her assistant that another Gale Wolf had appeared, but they had somehow managed to repel it. Hearing this shocked Estella, who immediately inquired if the princess had fought it herself or if the boys had protected her. Charlotte proudly revealed that it was Lest who had defended her, shocking Estella even further. Estella found it hard to believe, as Lest was widely known as a holder of a useless skill. But Charlotte assured her that she had witnessed everything with her own eyes, leaving no room for doubt. Since Charlotte had already disclosed it, Lest had no choice but to admit the truth. It was indeed he who had fought the wolf. He described it as a tough battle, but expressed his relief at somehow managing to repel it. After hearing this, Estella immediately conveyed her profound gratitude to Lest, even offering to properly thank him once everything had settled down. At this point, Lest realized he needed to exercise far greater caution when encountering characters from the game. Otherwise, he might find himself in even deeper trouble. For now, Lest escorted the two girls and his brothers out of the forest before any more dangers could approach them. When they finally made it back to the mansion, nearly every maid and servant in the household was distraught with worry. Everyone wondered where the boys and the princess had vanished to from the training ground. But before offering explanations, Lest quickly ordered everyone to tend to Her Highness's injuries first. Immediately, servants scurried to fetch medicines, towels, and water to care for the princess. Meanwhile, when the Marquis observed that Lest was the only one entirely unharmed, he instantly began to accuse him, demanding to know if Lest had done something to the four. However, the princess was quick to defend him to his father, insisting that Lest had done nothing wrong. In fact, he was the one who had saved her life. Hearing this deeply shocked the Marquis, who never imagined his least favorite child capable of such a feat. For the Marquis to better grasp the situation, Estella proceeded to explain everything in detail. She began by stating that she and Charlotte had been guided by the twins into the Arst Forest, which the boys claimed to explore regularly. However, while there, they had unexpectedly encountered two C-rank Gale Wolves, leading to the unfortunate situation. Upon hearing that his beloved sons had led the princess into the Arst Forest, the Marquis was in utter disbelief. As a precautionary measure, Estella then asked the Marquis if he had truly permitted his children to enter a forest where such dangerous monsters frequently appeared. The Marquis immediately denied this, stating that he would never allow such a thing, adding that his sons must have gone without permission. If this was true, Given that the young lady had been exposed to grave danger, Estella made it clear to the Marquis that the ultimate responsibility rested with him as the head of the household. Hearing this, the Marquis immediately grew nervous, fearing he might face severe punishment from the king for his son's reckless actions. But knowing that this would only cause more trouble, Charlotte decided not to escalate the situation further. The princess was also quite aware that they, too, bore some fault for blindly believing what the siblings had told them. Therefore, she had no intention of placing all the blame solely on the Marquis. More importantly, since Lest had single-handedly driven off the Gale Wolf and saved her life, Charlotte chose to overlook the incident in light of his heroic actions. After hearing the full story, the Marquis still struggled to believe that Lest had managed to take down the Gale Wolf by himself. While his father remained confused and frustrated, Lest meticulously avoided eye contact. Since they had endured so much that day, Charlotte then requested the Marquis show them to their rooms so they could finally rest. Before departing, Charlotte spoke to Lest one last time, promising to properly thank him again later. As the princess retired to her room, the Marquis was left to ponder how his worthless son had actually managed to defeat the Gale Wolf, unable to fathom how such a feat was even possible. In the end, Charlotte and her companion stayed at the mansion. That same night, Lest found sleep elusive, his mind replaying the day's events. Unable to rest, he decided to engage in some late-night training instead. On his way out, he unexpectedly encountered Charlotte, looking stunning in a white nightgown. Upon seeing Lest, Charlotte couldn't conceal her excitement. Finding themselves alone, Charlotte seized the opportunity to speak with Lest privately. Once again, she thanked him profusely, acknowledging that had he not rushed to her aid, she might have lost her life. Lest immediately urged her to raise her head, pointing out that it was disrespectful for a princess to bow before him. He then expressed his genuine relief that she was safe, giving Charlotte the impression that Lest was indeed a kind person. Charlotte also took the chance to voice her amazement at how Lest had managed to drive off the Gale Wolf entirely by himself. His swordsmanship was truly impressive, and Charlotte concluded that Lest had attained such remarkable strength precisely because of his intrinsic character. The two began exchanging compliments, to the point where both became visibly flustered. Joking aside, Charlotte became so open with Lest that she even confessed this experience had made her realize how much more she still had to learn. After that profound experience, Charlotte had made up her mind and now had a significant question for Lest. Seeing the princess blush somehow made Lest nervous, his heart began to pound. Charlotte simply looked at him and smiled for a moment before asking him to become her sworn friend. Confused at first, Lest listened as Charlotte explained she desired a friend who shared her ideals and her dedication to swordsmanship. The young boy had a rather awkward reaction. To further complicate things, Charlotte even added that she technically wanted Lest to be her rival, someone with whom she could compete and strive to become the best. Her excited demeanor suddenly softened as she recalled the stagnation in her own training. Until now, her sole objective had been to surpass Lady Elna. But Elna was simply too powerful. No matter how hard Charlotte tried to chase her, she could never even glimpse Elna's back as her mentor moved ever forward. With Lest, however, someone her own age who was always one step ahead, Charlotte felt she could finally have a genuine peer to train and compete with. She was certain that with him as her comrade, she would grow stronger. Lest found himself torn, uncertain whether to accept the princess's request. For the longest time, ever since his past life's memories had returned, he had resolved not to become deeply entangled with the game's main characters. Yet, no matter what he attempted, fate seemed to have other plans for him. In the end, he couldn't help but yield to the princess, who insisted relentlessly on his agreement. Besides, Lest truly had no other choice. Who was he, after all, to reject a princess's earnest plea? As soon as Lest assented, this confirmation brought immense joy to the princess, who genuinely wished for his friendship. Lest, for his part, also found himself looking forward to working alongside her, an outcome he himself had never anticipated. With their newfound status as official sword partners, the princess proposed an absurd idea, that Lest address her casually, using her nickname, Char. Hearing this, Lest was shocked, feeling it was far too much, especially given the vast difference in their social statuses. Charlotte quickly admonished him, stating she cared not for what anyone else thought. As long as she said it was fine, then it simply was fine. Now that Lest thought about it, Charlotte had always been quite the stubborn one in the game, never backing down once she made a decision. With that, Lest had no choice but to concede to the princess's wish and abandon formal speech. And just like that, the person Lest had painstakingly tried to avoid all this time had unexpectedly become his friend. Now, the lingering question was, would this connection ultimately benefit Lest, or would it merely usher in even greater complications? The next day, it was finally time for Charlotte to return to the palace. Before her departure, she ensured she bid everyone a proper farewell. As soon as the princess set off on her journey back to the royal capital, the Marquis was consumed by frustration. Of all people, Lest was the one who had captured the princess's interest. On top of that, the Marquis harshly scolded his twins for nearly bringing ruin upon the Albion family. The Marquis's wife then defended her sons, reminding her husband that while they had indeed endangered Princess Charlotte, they had only done so while attempting to follow his direct order to gain the princess's favor. But the Marquis seemed unable to comprehend or accept that fact. Moreover, because of his twin sons' foolishness, the princess had now become interested in their worthless son, Lest. Hearing all of this made Lest feel deeply uncomfortable and irritated, as he never imagined his family would make such a grand spectacle of the matter. Meanwhile, the twins attempted to explain themselves to their father, asserting that the princess's interest in Lest was based on a lie from the start. They simply couldn't believe that Lest had been capable of defeating a Gale wolf on his own. But since the princess herself had declared she saw it with her own eyes, the Marquis could no longer harbor doubts. However, determined to make the situation about them, the twins then claimed that Lest had only succeeded because they had already weakened the wolf before they passed out, attempting to make it appear as though Lest had merely landed the final blow. They added that Lest had merely taken advantage of the confusion and tricked the princess, an act they deemed absolutely unforgivable. Since the Marquis himself was still in deep denial, although the twins' explanation was completely illogical, he forced himself to believe it was the truth, causing Lest to look upon them with profound dismay and frustration. In the back of Lest's mind, while Edward and the others had indeed attacked the Gale wolf, their blows had been entirely without weight, inflicting no damage whatsoever. Certain that he was responsible for the wolf's defeat, Lest would not allow his brothers to take credit for his accomplishment this time. However, the Marquis refused to even listen, telling Lest to stop spouting nonsense. But this time, Lest was unwilling to be trampled by his own family any longer. His fierce dedication and his insistence that he was the one who had truly defeated the Gale wolf shocked his father, who had never seen Lest so serious. To ascertain if Lest was indeed as strong as he claimed, the Marquis ordered him to duel both Edward and Sidward simultaneously, demanding he achieve victory to prove his claim regarding the Gale wolf's defeat. Considering Edward and Sidward couldn't handle the wolf themselves, if Lest was telling the truth, defeating the two of them should be an easy task. Upon hearing this, the twins couldn't contain their excitement, supremely confident they would defeat their brother in no time. While a 2-on-1 duel might traditionally go against chivalry, the twins were certain that even the goddess would permit it if it served to expose the foolish brothers' lies. At this point, if Edward and Sidward could unleash their true strength without reservation, they were not weak enough to be overwhelmed by a Gale wolf. So, individually, they were almost on par with Lest. But against both at once, Lest knew he wouldn't stand a chance. However, that was the situation yesterday. Now that he had successfully tamed the Gale wolf and unlocked its new power, that logic no longer applied. With newfound confidence, Lest knew he would be able to defeat his brothers swiftly. This overflowing self-assurance visibly shocked his family. But before their duel could even begin, an unexpected guest arrived. Elna, of all people, offered to serve as a witness to the brothers' duel. Even the Marquis was stunned, having not expected Lady Elna's presence so far in advance of her next training session. Elna immediately explained that she had received a message from Estella, informing her that her students had been attacked by a gale wolf, and she was relieved to hear they had managed to repel it. Unable to simply sit still, she decided to come at once to check on her students. Upon her arrival, Elna had happened to overhear that the 3 students she was teaching were about to duel. Since she was already present, Elna decided to serve as the official witness for their fight. Hearing Elna refer to 3 of her students, the Marquis finally realized she had also been teaching Lest, in addition to Edward and Sidward. Elna quickly and calmly explained her decision to the Marquis, stating that she had only agreed due to Lest's firm request. Because of that, she had been supervising Lest's training ever since. As soon as Elna revealed this, the twins and the Marquis could not conceal their profound shock. With a serious expression, Elna told the 3 that her decision was purely personal, and the time she had spent training Lest was minuscule compared to the twins. And yet, even considering all that, she personally didn't believe Lest could defeat Edward and Sidward. She wondered where Lest's immense confidence originated, and as his teacher, she desired to confirm it for herself. Hearing this gave the Marquis a fleeting glimpse of hope that Lest was not as talented as the princess might have believed. But Lest knew deep down that Elna had been observing his growth all this time. This was why he was certain she understood he was not the type of person to flaunt baseless confidence or power. Knowing that his mentor was merely testing him, Lest resolved not only to prove himself to his family, but also to his master, Elna. With that said, as the duel was about to commence, Lest moved to his position. Upon seeing his wooden sword, the boys immediately knew he was indeed telling the truth about being Elna's disciple. However, while Lest's weapon was merely wood, the twins wielded weapons crafted for real combat. This disparity made Lest feel a flicker of nervousness, but also curiosity about his siblings' current thoughts. As it turned out, the reason Lest was so confident he could defeat both his brothers lay in the new power he had gained through taming. Now, with enhanced physical abilities and wind magic at his disposal, Lest felt a strong sense of confidence that he could pull this off. Still, he had no intention of openly using wind magic here. Moreover, he preferred not to reveal the true potential of Tame just yet, as it would only cause him undue trouble. Besides, his trump cards weren't limited to wind magic at all. He knew there was still a vast reservoir of power he could acquire sooner or later. Moments later, the duel finally began, and the twins initiated the first attack, confident they could knock Lest down swiftly. While there was no doubt they were fast and quite strong, Lest's agility had improved equally. Witnessing their brother move like this for the first time utterly shocked the twins. They had never anticipated Lest would be able to block all their attacks. So, they redoubled their efforts, working in concert. When one of the twins finally found an opening, they immediately attempted to finish the fight with a single blow. Believing Lest would be unable to block a steel greatsword with a mere wooden one, Edward aimed to shatter Lest's weapon. But instead of worrying, Lest recognized this as the perfect moment to deploy his trump card, Magic Infusion. Thanks to this magic, he was able to block Edward's powerful attack. Shocked by his brother's impossible feat, Edward immediately demanded to know what he had done. Lest didn't hesitate, telling him the truth. The technique he used was an advanced form of mana control called Magic Infusion. By infusing magic into the tiniest gaps within an object, this technique could drastically enhance its strength. But for someone like Edward, who knew nothing beyond blindly swinging a sword, this technique might be beyond his comprehension. And hearing Lest say such a thing visibly angered Edward. For more context, Magic Infusion also existed in the game Lest played in his past life. It was generally a powerful and versatile skill utilized by frontline classes, yet mastering it required a substantial amount of magic power and incredibly delicate magical control. By diligently training his magic every single day until now, Lest had managed to acquire a solid grasp of this intricate control technique. On top of that, thanks to the boost in magic power he received from taming the Gale Wolf, Lest could now finally unleash it in a real battle. Beyond that, through the taming process, Lest had also gained another skill: By circulating magic throughout his entire body, he could further enhance his physical abilities. Because of this, he could now activate both body enhancement and magic infusion simultaneously. In both weapon performance and physical strength, Les now held a clear advantage. His twin brothers simply couldn't believe that the sibling they had looked down on for years was now stronger and far more capable than they were. Having attacked him constantly for minutes, now quite exhausted, the twins didn't even know what to do next. No matter what they tried, nothing seemed to work against Les. Now that they had been given ample time to initiate their attacks, it was Les' turn to demonstrate his true capabilities. Without hesitation, Les confidently launched his own assault, a smile gracing his face with every strike. His brothers were astounded to witness his sudden greatness. When they believed they might finally get a chance to counterattack, Les effortlessly dodged, remarking that their moves were too obvious. Given his brothers' wide-open stances, Les had no difficulty landing precise hits on them. As the fight continued, the Marquis, witnessing the duel, was left speechless. At this point, he began to wonder why Les, who possessed only tame, was capable of moving with such proficiency. Even their mother was in deep shock, unable to believe what she was seeing. Meanwhile, Elna watched intently, closely observing Les' movements and profound improvements. She was quick to note that Les' rate of growth until now was already extraordinary, but his improvement over just this past month defied all common sense. There was something within Les, a quality that even Elna herself couldn't fully perceive. But Elna also couldn't deny that Edward and the others still possessed trump cards they hadn't yet revealed. The overwhelming power of skills was capable of overturning a commoner's efforts in an instant. If Les couldn't overcome that, he could not advance beyond this point. During this fight, Les had only two paths to victory, either to knock his opponents unconscious or force them to surrender. He knew well that the former was simpler. But even if he won with a single knockout blow, they might later complain with flimsy excuses, just as they had with the Gale Wolf incident. In that scenario, Les had no choice but to thoroughly demonstrate which of them was truly superior. Now that the fight had intensified, Les could feel a palpable shift in the atmosphere. His brothers were more agitated than before, yelling at him not to underestimate them. They then continued to make excuses, claiming they had been holding back until now and that once they used their trump cards, Les would be finished in an instant. Moments later, the twins unleashed their individual specialized skills: rockfall and high-speed dance. However, Les had already anticipated this. Just like him, his brothers possessed specialized skills tailored to their respective weapons. While Les had Flash Strike as a countermeasure, it was ultimately just a basic skill and wouldn't be nearly as effective. Moreover, in terms of both power and speed, it paled in comparison to his brother's specialized skills. At this rate, Les was acutely aware that he would be overpowered and overwhelmed by his brothers, with no options left. A decisive demonstration of the difference between those with combat-focused skills and those without. Although he hadn't planned on using his other trump card yet, he found himself with no choice but to deploy a specialized skill. With intense focus, he activated his wind magic skill, enveloping his blade in wind vibrating at ultra-high speeds. This skill replicated the ultimate cutting edge and was called Matoi Kazutachi. With this ability, Les effortlessly sliced through his twin brother's blades, shocking both his father and mother. At this point, the twins stumbled backward, visibly frightened by Les' astonishing skill. And just like that, with Edward and Sidward surrendering, Elna confirmed Les as the winner of the duel. The twins' mother could not bring herself to believe that a concubine's child like Les had defeated her sons. Meanwhile, the Marquis walked away, deeply frustrated by what had just transpired. The twins immediately ran after him, attempting to explain. As soon as everyone else had departed, Elna immediately commended Les for his performance. It wasn't that she doubted his claim of defeating the Gale Wolf, but frankly, this result had genuinely surprised her. Hearing this, Les expressed his relief that he hadn't displayed an unsightly battle unworthy of Elna's student. But considering those twins were also Elna's students, she simply laughed at Les' comment. Despite that, she hoped this incident would encourage them to train harder. Regardless of the outcome, Elna could not have been prouder of Lest. Now that the duel was over, Elna also expressed that she had several questions regarding Lest's techniques, a remark that instantly made Lest nervous. However, she decided not to interrogate him about everything. But she still wished to ask him one specific thing. At the moment, Edward and the others were about to unleash their techniques. Elna noticed Lest had hesitated for an instant. She wondered if, perhaps, Lest had been considering a countermeasure other than destroying their weapons. Now that Elna had mentioned it, it was true that Lest could have subdued them without resorting to mate kazatachi. But completely blocking their powerful skills would also have been immensely difficult for him. However, Lest was certain he could have at least deflected the trajectory of their initial strikes with his wooden sword. Although it would have meant inducing friendly fire, this method presented several problems. First, since it relied on using the opponent's strength against them, Lest anticipated that his brothers might refuse to acknowledge his power. Another issue was the risk of seriously injuring them. While unavoidable in a duel, Lest wanted to avoid the hassle of them complaining later because he had harmed them. For these reasons, Lest chose to destroy their weapons using mate kazatachi, and it seemed Elna had seen right through his reasoning. In any case, Lest had secured a certain standing within the Albion household. Knowing he couldn't have achieved this without the Gale Wolf's power, he decided to offer his new companion a word of thanks. Using his power, he opened a portal into his interdimensional world and called out for Gale. The tamed monster, eager to emerge from the portal, was prevented by Lest. Knowing that Gale's appearance would cause much trouble, Lest decided to enter his world instead. As soon as he stepped inside, he immediately thanked Gale for its wind magic, which had been instrumental in defeating his two brothers. While winning the duel was good, Lest knew he still needed to consider the future. Then, all of a sudden, a panel popped into existence, informing Lest that his tame slot limit had been reached. To perform the next taming, the limit must be increased. This, however, was no surprise. Lest had anticipated this. While tame was incredibly powerful, the number of taming slots was restricted. To subjugate monsters other than Gale, Lest absolutely needed to raise his skill level. Based on his game memories, the original Lest had only ever subjugated about 5 monsters in total. Each one was powerful, and Lest himself gained considerable strength. But because he had neglected his own training, he became instantly weak if his monsters were defeated first. To ensure this fate didn't befall him here, Lest planned to raise his own level no matter what. While late-night training could improve his stats, for more efficient growth, he had no choice but to defeat monsters and gain experience points. By taming Gale, Lest finally possessed strength close to B rank, despite being C rank himself. At this point, he should be able to handle reasonable, unexpected situations on his own. However, he still yearned to fight monsters in the Arst Forest, but given the circumstances, his family would never permit him entry again. Yet for his next tame, he already had a monster in mind, one residing deep within the Arst Forest. And so, the very next day, in a surprising turn of events, his problems were finally solved. Meanwhile, the Marquis began to wonder to himself how circumstances had so drastically shifted. 3 months ago, at the Divine Oracle ceremony, the skill granted to his son was tame. For the Albion family, which had produced generations of the strongest class of swordsmen, this was a useless, garbage tier dud skill, utterly valueless in combat. It was only natural for the Marquis to perceive this as nothing less than a profound disgrace. Therefore, immediately after the ceremony, he had issued a notice to all relevant parties, explicitly stating that Lest was removed as a candidate for the next head of the house. By demonstrating a willingness to cut off even his own flesh and blood without mercy, the Marquis had sought to flaunt his strength, like a lion. But now, Lest had grown into a warrior capable of defeating even a Gale Wolf, and he had, in turn, caught the eye of the second princess. At this point, the Marquis felt a rising frustration with his own past decisions. Since Lest's reputation had now risen, his decision to remove him as a candidate could easily be seen as a grave mistake of perception that, above all else, must be avoided. However, the Marquis continued to convince himself that he had made no error. Someone who merely wielded a skill like tame could never lead the proud Albion family. That was why, to ensure he wasn't embarrassed in front of everyone, the Marquis planned to prove Lest utterly unfit to be the next head, no matter the cost. He was so invested in this, he even contemplated eliminating Lest's place within the Albion family, in both name and reality. Beyond that, it was also revealed that the household had an eldest son, attending the academy, who had been chosen for the same high-grade skill of Sword Saint. The Marquis was certain that as long as his eldest son demonstrated his power to everyone, the future of the Albion family was secure. Although the Marquis was already planning to expel Lest, doing so would be incredibly difficult given Lest's favor with the princess. But as cruel as it may be, the Marquis ultimately decided to send Lest into the Arst Forest once more, hoping the monsters within would take care of his son for him. Little did the Marquis know that for someone like Lest, who desired to level up quickly, this was the absolute best offer he could receive. Yet, Lest still wondered why his father would give him such an order, allowing him to investigate such a dangerous forest alone. Although the Marquis attempted to construct logical explanations for his decision, Lest remained unconvinced, knowing his father harbored deeper, underlying intentions. However, in that moment, his father's true motives no longer mattered. Considering this was such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Lest immediately accepted the offer and ventured into the forest to increase his level as swiftly as possible. In the game, Arst was divided into 3 distinct sections: the shallow layer, the middle layer, and the deep layer. The area entrusted to him this time was only the easiest part, the shallow layer. He immediately realized his father must have figured out that ordering him to investigate the middle or deep layers right away would seem unnatural. Monsters appearing in the shallow layer were generally weak, ranging from lower E rank to middle D rank. However, Lest didn't mind fighting off as many monsters as he could, especially with Gale by his side. Furthermore, one of the unconventional effects granted by his tame skill was its ability to enhance not just the tamer, but also the tamed monster. Moreover, this enhancement multiplier increased proportionally with Lest's own strength. Because of this synergistic effect, Lest was able to seamlessly fight off every monster that ran his way, until a Firebird, a D-rank upper monster, appeared out of nowhere. Since his wooden sword couldn't reach it, Lest saw this as the perfect opportunity to practice his wind magic. Fortunately, just as with his wooden sword, he managed to defeat the Firebird in short order. As he began to level up, a pleasant sensation rushed through his body, almost as if he had become lighter, a feeling he hadn't experienced when he fought Gale the other day. Coincidentally, the experience from monsters defeated by Gale naturally flowed to Lest as well. Thanks to that, his level continued to rise steadily, without pause. Simultaneously, he also continued to train his wind magic, a practice difficult to undertake discreetly within the mansion. And so, at an astonishing speed, Lest continued to grow stronger. A week had passed since the commencement of the Arst Forest investigation. At times, powerful stray creatures, akin to Gale, would appear, but day after day, Lest and Gale managed to defeat the monsters together to the point where they were no longer a match for them. So, if Lest desired to level up further, he would likely need to challenge the middle layers and beyond. However, since he hadn't yet received permission from his father, he began contemplating whether he should simply sneak off and go anyway without informing him. To his surprise, however, as soon as he returned home that day, his father told him that starting tomorrow, he would be surveying deeper areas. This shocked Lest. He had never expected his father to say such a thing. In the back of his mind, his father must have grown impatient, seeing him effortlessly handle the shallow layers. Once again, Lest was thankful that his father had given him an order at the perfect timing. But just to be sure, he asked his father if he was truly allowing him to enter the middle layers, where much stronger monsters appeared. The Marquis didn't hesitate to say yes, even telling Lest that he was doing this because he supposedly had high expectations for him. Little did the Marquis know he was literally granting his least favorite son an incredible favor. As soon as the sun rose the next day, Lest and Gale were excited to resume their training, now in the middle layers of the forest. In the shallow layers, most monsters ranged from lower E rank to mid D rank, but in the middle layers, even high C rank monsters could appear. Still, even opponents like that weren't enough to challenge them sufficiently. Before Lest realized it, he had apparently reached B rank level strength thanks to the stronger monsters he had been able to fight over the past few days. And so, steadily leveling up, another week passed. Then, without any warning, a monster they weren't expecting suddenly appeared. It was a mid-B rank monster, and it had been a real pain even in the game. Since Lest truly wanted to finish this monster off quickly, he called for Gale to assist him. With their powers combined, especially with Lest employing his Wind Sever Armor magic, they managed to land a significant hit on the monster. However, just like in the game, the Cyclops was about to unleash its I-Beam skill, a high-power special attack. But since Lest knew its timing, he was confident he could dodge it easily. However, instead of doing that, Lest deliberately faced it head-on, planning to intercept it at all costs. He had only been able to test this against weaklings before, but with the Cyclops before him, Lest was excited to test his skills fully. And just like that, Lest managed to take down this massive creature with just one hit. Because the required value had been reached, Lest's level increased again, meaning he could finally tame another monster. Lest was pretty excited to use this card again, as he could finally tame a second monster. For days now, he had already decided which monster to tame next, one residing in the deep layers of the Arst forest. Lest hadn't yet received permission from his father to enter, but he couldn't help but wonder if he truly needed it. Although he desperately wanted to increase his skills again, since they had already had quite a long day, Lest decided to head back to the mansion for now, certain that tomorrow he and Gale would fight, without a doubt, the strongest opponent they had faced so far. And this was a legendary creature, whose tales were passed down throughout the country. The monster Lest would attempt to tame tomorrow was none other than a dragon. The next day, though Lest hadn't been officially cleared by his father to explore the deepest parts of the forest, he decided to head to their destination anyway. Having already broken through the upper and middle layers, they battled their way through B-rank monsters for an hour to dive deeper into the forest. Eventually, after hours of fighting, they finally reached the heart of their journey. As they arrived at an open field, Lest looked excited, waiting for their opponent to finally appear. Then, all of a sudden, a strong gust of wind alerted them. Moments later, a black dragon suddenly appeared, flying out of an abandoned church. As its roar echoed through the field, instead of feeling nervous, Lest looked rather exhilarated to finally have the chance to fight such a massive creature. And to think that this dragon was still young, yet already exuding such an overwhelming aura, truly amazed Lest to his core. In the game, it was only a tenth of its peak size, but when fully grown, it surpassed 100 meters and might even explode. In the original story, this dragon was controlled by a demon general and went berserk, leaving half the capital destroyed. Heroes were defeated by its might, and Lest, in his past life, thought the entire nation could be wiped out. But the dragon eventually broke free from the demon's grasp and later helped the people. With its last breath, it healed the towns it had inadvertently harmed. When it was already breathing its dying breath, the black dragon suddenly spoke, shocking everyone. It was then revealed that the black dragon's distant ancestors had once served as divine protectors of the realm, legendary dragons who shielded towns from countless demons and creatures. That was why, above all, the black dragon wanted to avoid destroying people or nations with its own power. Eventually, the black dragon finished its tale and slipped into eternal slumber with quiet dignity. Since this was an inevitable loss event after all, though it wasn't the most popular scene among players, it strangely lingered in Lest's mind. Despite this dragon appearing only once in the game, Lest had felt a strong connection with it back then. Then, when he realized he was reborn as Lest, the very first thought that came to him was that he would use his taming power to command this dragon, no matter what. After all, this dragon would surely be a powerful ally if tamed, and Lest wanted to prevent the tragedy of the original story. So, 4 months after he swore to tame this creature, the moment had finally arrived. But to tame it, he must first defeat it with all his strength, or else he would be the one dead by the end of the fight. In this world, dragons possessed immense magical power, rightfully termed the king of magic that could transform all realities. It grew rapidly by absorbing magic, reaching Super S rank when fed by demon generals. But as a hatchling, it should only be top B rank. So, with Gale and his own strength combined, Lest was certain that victory wasn't out of their reach at all. With this resolve, the fight eventually began with the dragon finally making its move. Although a little nervous, Lest and Gale also wanted to ensure they showed this creature their true power as well. Without hesitation, Lest and Gale charged in. Using the technique Cyclone Blast, Lest hoped they would be able to catch the monster off guard, even if only slightly. However, to their surprise, with just one flap of its wings, the monster managed to counter their attack. But Lest tried to think optimistically at all times and even charged in once more. While they were trying their best to ensure everything went well, the dragon slowly began to aim and cast its pure, massive destruction magic. Although this was such a deadly power, Lest wasn't even scared of it at all. As an avid player of the game, he knew that as long as he dodged it, this power meant nothing. So, when Lest managed to find an opening using his wind magic, he tried to initiate aerial combat. Using his physical enhancement, plus his age magic, Lest managed to land a hit on the legendary monster. As it roared in pain, Lest told Gale to attack it again to ensure it was down. However, even Gale's claws couldn't break through the dragon's hide. So, as soon as the black dragon got back on its feet again, Lest prepared himself, knowing the real fight was about to begin. Over the next few minutes, Gale and Lest tried their best to beat this monster. The mighty black dragon, once shot down from the sky, seemed to have given up on soaring through the heavens once more. In exchange, the black dragon poured its entire might into the ground battle. So Lest knew well that if he let his guard down, even for a heartbeat, defeat would seize him in its ruthless grip. Yet, in the midst of battle, there was this strange sensation, a rush of exhilaration that Lest had never felt before. In this particular battle, all he could do was clash with this monster, almost as if it were a puppet of the demon horde. That was why Lest saw this as a rare, perfect chance to fight with honor. So, no matter how daunting it seemed, Lest would do everything to ensure he didn't let this opportunity slip away. After all, the thrill of facing such a formidable foe was electrifying for Lest, which was why his grip on the wooden sword naturally tightened. Without hesitation or any hint of fear, Lest wanted to face this monster directly, as a part of him craved more of this now more than ever. But more importantly, he truly wanted to succeed in taming this black dragon, no matter what, as this was the only way he would be able to save it from a sorrowful fate. So, with immense effort and dedication, Lest looked forward to seizing that victory, no matter what. Each attack from the black dragon was fierce, but it consistently left itself open. So dodging without a scratch wasn't particularly hard for Gale and Lest. However, Lest still felt like something was off. Even as a young creature, this monster was indeed a true king of magic. As they continued to fight, Lest somehow noticed that this dragon wasn't aiming to hit them at all. It was almost as if it was intentionally letting them notice. As they stood still, the monster was now about to unleash its power. And although there had been numerous unavoidable, powerful attacks up until now, if Lest's prediction was spot on, what the dragon was doing right now was simply a breath attack. This one was truly something that these two needed to avoid at all costs, since if they didn't, they might end up getting killed. At this point, Lest finally realized that taming wasn't just about overpowering a monster. It was more than simply defeating them. As the black dragon proceeded to blow its deadly breath, all Lest could do was stand still as the attack rushed towards him. The breath itself was scorching hot, but that wasn't even the worst part. For Lest, the scariest thing about this was the insane amount of magic the dragon possessed. Now that he was about to be vaporized by the monster, Lest began to wonder if he had truly misjudged everything. But to his surprise, the monster's breath didn't cause any damage to him at all. As it turned out, the black dragon had never truly intended to harm them from the very beginning. The strange feeling Lest had gotten from all those attacks that seemed to miss had not been wrong. The breath was the only true concern, but it had given birth to a hypothesis. Lest had thought he could withstand the breath attack, and as everyone could now see, his hunch had been spot on. At first glance, one would perceive the dragon's actions as a serious breath attack, but it only masked the outside with dense magic, leaving the inside hollow. Since it required incredibly advanced magic control, a feat only the dragon, the king of magic, could achieve, the real question now was, what was the black dragon's true intention in the first place? The dragon not only demonstrated vast power and wisdom, but it also shared an ancient respect for protecting people and upholding one's dignity. With that said, although Lest hadn't actually killed the dragon, the game now allowed him to tame it. As it turned out, they had simply been tested this entire time. For the black dragon, who held the memory of ancestors protecting this land, it did not want its power used to harm innocent people. The dragon truly had no intention of hurting an innocent person like Lest. And because Lest had realized that, and had respected its pride, the black dragon had agreed to be tamed in the end. So, without hesitation, since this was something Lest genuinely desired, he immediately proceeded with his plan, telling the dragon that he had actually come here to protect its pride. Realizing that Lest was someone who would not harm it, the dragon lowered its head, giving Lest permission to pet it. As soon as Lest placed his hands on the dragon's nose, the taming magic immediately began, and Lest was now about to make one of the most majestic creatures in this world a part of his power. While this was all happening, Lest could feel every part of him, even his senses, awakening. He himself couldn't believe that such a potent power actually existed. After a while, the taming was finally complete, and Lest received a portion of the tamed creature's power, which was called the Dragon's Blessing. This power granted Lest strong resistance to status ailments and advanced magic control. Hearing this truly made Lest happy, since in the game, the black dragon could convert magic into any phenomenon. So, with this, he should now be able to do the same. Lest had hoped for the dragon's concept interference skills, but since the creature was still young, it simply hadn't learned those skills yet. However, with enough growth, Lest would surely be granted more power. And just imagining it was thrilling for him. Since he couldn't keep calling this creature, Black Dragon, forever, he decided to name it Noir. And it seemed the dragon loved that name so much that it roared loudly. Now that they had managed to tame Noir, even Gale couldn't help but cry in victory. With two of the strongest monsters in this world now at his command, Lest looked forward to achieving great things with his new comrades. Now that they had achieved their goal, Lest decided to finally head back home. Since he couldn't possibly take the dragon home in such a massive form, Lest decided to let him into his interdimensional residence to live with Gale as well. However, it seemed Noir didn't really want to leave the forest at all, which made Lest remember that the Arst Forest was actually teeming with powerful beasts drawing evil magic. Demons were often summoned here, drawn to prey on the abundant magic. In the game, their strength and cruelty stood out, and they were deeply tied to Lest's original fate. This was where Noir stepped in, as in the game, he was the one who purified this evil magic, stopping demons from being summoned. Noir had been guarding the people from the shadows all this time, and Lest totally understood why he couldn't simply go with them. Because of this, Lest decided to let Noir stay behind. However, he did ask Noir that in case he ever needed its strength, Lest hoped Noir would be there to lend it to him. Although Noir couldn't speak human language, its subtle nod reassured Lest. In that moment, Lest managed to create a bond that linked master and beast at all times. In a pinch, the bond would alert the other to danger. So when the time came, Lest knew they would rush to each other's aid. Seeing Noir fly back to its base, Lest now had immense motivation to work hard, knowing that once he tamed a few more creatures, he could finally use Summon Beast like in the game. As they finally made their way home, Lest couldn't help but feel proud of himself and Gale for managing to tame Noir, as this had given him a huge stat boost on top of the dragon's blessing. But beyond that, since he had also managed to acquire a shrink spell, Lest decided to try it out on Gale. And the result was remarkably cute. With this new, smaller size, Lest could now keep Gale at the mansion. However, as they were testing the spell, a monster suddenly rushed to attack Lest. At this point, Lest found himself fighting monsters one after the other. This one, however, was no ordinary monster. Based on its appearance, this monster was on par with Noir. The trickiest part, Lest found, was its insane physical resistance. For someone who fought with a wooden sword like him, fighting such a monster was a terrible matchup. Although he didn't want to fight anymore, with this monster's speed, there was no way he would be able to escape. So, Lest had no choice but to fight, no matter what. Meanwhile, Gale also stepped in to help his master using his own skills. And based on what they observed, magic seemed to severely affect this monster. So, while Gale attacked with intermediate magic, Lest tried his best to land a hit on this creature, certain he could inflict damage. To Lest's surprise, magic came together much more easily than usual, perhaps caused by the dragon's blessing. With this unexpected boon, Lest hoped he would be able to pull off this trick without a problem. Despite it still being new to him, Lest surprisingly performed exceptionally well on his first try. With just one blow, he was able to kill the creature, completely creating a hole in its stomach. Gale, along with Lest himself, was shocked by the scene. This was something far beyond his expectations. At this point, Lest finally realized that with the sword skills taught by Elna, the magic from taming Gale and Noir, and the potent combination of both, his path to the top was clear, positioning him to become the strongest warrior this world had ever seen. And the only thing he needed to do now was charge ahead and never look back.